Hey guys, Dr. Tobisch here again with Whitefish Chiropractic. And in this short video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about scoliosis and more specifically the role that muscle imbalance plays in the scoliotic spine starting to curve off to the side laterally. So throughout development, we want the muscles surrounding and attached to the spine to have equal and balanced activity and tension. This is going to help guide the spine vertically throughout the developmental process. These muscles play a similar role to that of guy wires surrounding a tall radio tower. If all of those wires surrounding the tower have equal tension, that's going to help give the tower stability. It's going to help it maintain its vertical position. If some of those wires were excessively tight and others were slack, that would make the tower much more likely to crumble and collapse. And it's kind of the same thing that we see when we're looking for muscle activity and imbalance around the spine when we're assessing somebody for scoliosis. So we use some simple functional tests to gauge whether or not the activity of the muscles pulling on the spine is balanced and equal. And if we find some imbalances in some areas, that basically tells us what we need to do from a muscle activation and exercise standpoint to help balance out the muscle activity to guide the spine vertically and start fighting against that lateral progression of the spine in a scoliotic patient. So now that we've talked a little bit about muscle imbalance, next up, we're going to go over some of the functional tests that we use when we're assessing somebody for scoliosis. All right, guys, the first test we're going to be looking at is called the quadruped rock test. And what we're looking for with this test is muscle imbalance around the upper back and the shoulder girdles. So we'll have Dr. Annie on all fours, and we should see the spine nice and straight. We want to see the scapulas down flat to the rib cage. Next up, we're going to have her start to slowly rock forward out over her hands, and then she'll rock back towards her heels. And again, we want to look for any deviation in the spine. We want to see if the shoulders start shrugging up, or specifically, do either of the shoulder blades start to wing up off of the rib cage? That would give us good findings about muscle imbalance in the upper back and around the shoulder girdle. That would tell us what we need to do from a treatment standpoint. All right, guys, next thing that we're going to look at is a simple squat test. But this simple test gives us a lot of great information. So we're going to have Dr. Annie knock out a couple of these air squats, and I'm going to point out some of the things that we look at in this assessment. So as you're looking head on, one thing that we want to see is, does she maintain a good position in her knees? Or as she does a couple of these, do her knees start to collapse in? That gives us some good information about hip stability. As I'm looking from the side, I want to see, does she maintain a good position in her low back? Does she start to dump her pelvis, go into excessive extension? Gives us good information about core stabilization. So if her face that way. The other thing we want to see, if somebody does have a curve, as they do some of these squats, does their curve start to increase? Do they start to get a progression of the curve? Or if they look relatively straight, as they do these squats, do they start to develop some of that lateral deviation in the spine? So that's our squat test. All right, guys, thanks for watching. If you've got kids or young ones in your family, try out some of these tests and see if you have any positive findings. If you do, we strongly suggest getting in for a complimentary scoliosis screen. We provide those at all 3 of our locations here in the Flathead Valley. If you want to get on our schedule for a complimentary scoliosis screen, give us a call at 406-862-2121 or find us online at whitefishchiropracticcenter.com to schedule your appointment today.